Everybody, and welcome to another of our Spiritualism Lyceum Nights. Great pleasure to introduce our guest tonight, Mr. Simon James. Simon, good evening, welcome, and again, thank you so much for taking this evening for us.
It's a pleasure, Laurie. Absolute pleasure.
Absolutely wonderful. Simon is a very great orator. He is co-author of the book Magician to Mystic. And believe me, if you are developing on that mediumistic path or indeed into the spirituality aspect of things, I thoroughly recommend it. It was a big ground movement with my work with spirit when I read that book. So always indebted to you and Brian for that book and the knowledge that you shared. But your knowledge doesn't stop there. You know, you have this wonderful energy and this wonderful magic when you talk about spirit. You bring in such many new thoughts, new ideas, sometimes challenging, and that's good. That is good. I think we all need a little challenge every now and then, but always in that energy of love. So your topic tonight, spiritualism in the 21st century, really piqued my curiosity because very much of the now and the future within our movement. So your thoughts on that, please, Simon?
Well, I think what we have to look at within this, and I'm just going to actually read you something that speaks to this, is first of all, before we can even look at the relevance of spiritualism in the 21st century, we really need to be asking ourselves what exactly the definition of spiritualism is, because for a lot of people, when they're asked what spiritualism means to them, you'll get probably a myriad and variety of answers. And spiritualists, generally speaking, and this has been one of the most fascinating things historically, is that spiritualists have always fought against any kind of homogeneous view or overarching theme in which they could belong, mainly because to them it was almost smacked of the theocracy and the orthodox religious systems that most of them had actually come from, and really to describe an overarching theme within spiritualism is often difficult, and not to put too fine a point on it. Whenever you get a bunch of spiritualists together try to define something, they'll generally fight like cats in a sack, because they just don't do well with structure. The only problem with this is that historically, the lack of a structure, and I don't want to get into the theology of spiritualism, particularly just because of time. But even though spiritualism itself, well, depending on which flavor of it, if you will, that you follow, always states that it has no creed that it follows. That's debatable, really. But when we begin to look at this, we have to recognize that having some form of structure is generally what keeps organizations together and keeps them going. Now, obviously, when spiritualism appeared in its modern form in the 19th century, to sort of go against the structure of orthodox religions and traditions was very groundbreaking and revolutionary, which attracted so many of the great thinkers of the time and the great scientists of the time. And I'm not going to go into the history of spiritualism, but certainly, the great names that we hear of that spoke of social change, such as certainly in the United States, Susan B. Anthony, dealing with women's suffrage, spoke on spiritualist platforms, and she always said that it was only the spiritualist churches that would actually allow her to have a platform on which to speak on. The first woman to run for president of the United States wasn't Hillary Clinton, as many of you know. It was a lady by the name of Victoria Woodhull, who obviously didn't win, but subsequently went on to become the first female stockbroker on Wall Street. I mean, that's what was happening in the United States. But, spiritualism created the conditions necessary for these individuals to, on one level, take what they needed from spiritualism, at the same time mold it, and at the same time allow it to be a platform for very, very powerful social change. And so spiritualism had a freedom to not be tied to any particular book or idea. However, and this is my opinion, it sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater, in the sense that by not having a structure, then it enabled anybody with any idea, and sometimes without any ideas whatsoever, to then define what spiritualism was. And so when you have a vacuum, if you will, at the heart of a belief system, or certainly a number of different viewpoints, what you have then is freedom, definitely. But then you have the danger of a lack of cohesion, and particularly new belief systems and new religions generally, historically, don't survive much beyond 200, 250 years. They don't last much longer than that. Because unless there's an overarching theme, a text, a book, something in which the whole, either the state is driven by or the people are driven by, those ideas eventually peter out. So I wanted to just share with you, certainly within national spiritualism, and I'm taking this from the Lyceum manual, which I think defines spiritualism, certainly for me, as a good way of describing what we can work towards, and at the same time aim for. And I just want to just share this with you. And this is the aim of spiritualism: is to effect an at-one-ment and unison of humanity with God, until every action and thought of humanity is in perfect harmony with the divine will. And it lays down no creed, asks no symbol, and reverences no time or place. It is reverent to truth only. Now, that for me pretty much sums up spiritualism. And in sort of preparing this talk and just sharing a few ideas with you, I have to ask myself, first of all, what is the relevance of spiritualism to my life? What does it do for me? And I'm certainly not going to break into an entire history of my relationship with spiritualism. But spiritualism is the closest thing to what I believe. And certainly for myself, when I came into spiritualism as a teenager, I definitely wasn't looking for communication with the other side. Yes, I'd, lost grandparents and friends, but there was no great need of communication. But what I was looking for was a relationship with the divine. I was looking for God, if you will. And so when I saw this many, many years ago, the aim of spiritualism is for us to effect an at-one-ment and unity with the divine. That was the point that stayed with me really from the beginning as my tie with this belief system, my tie with the understanding of what spiritualism means to me. And as we move into the 21st century, and certainly as we come out of this hugely important time historically, we need to really begin to recognize, one, the relationship that we have to spiritualism. Now, one of the things that, if you ask for most people what spiritualism means to them, generally speaking, they won't talk about God. They'll talk about spirit.
Yeah.
They will talk about communication with the dead. Generally, that's one of the first thing that comes up. Probably second may be healing. God, or having a relationship with God, generally comes pretty much down the list. Because for many, many years, we don't do God. We use the word spirit because, the word God might offend people because they may have come from an Orthodox background and they still have issues with the word. And yet, spiritualism in its central understanding has always spoken about that core of the divine upon which everything is derived, and to which we constantly move back towards. That is this constant revelation. And spiritualism in the 19th century was described as the new revelation. It constantly revealed itself. It constantly changed and moved in conjunction with scientific understanding and the change within society. And one of the great difficulties that, certainly since I've been involved in spiritualism, pretty much over these last, just having to do a bit of math there, which was never my strong point, the last 30 odd years, nearly 35 years now, is that in many respects, it's the same, in the same place of when I came in, that in many places it is now. And when I came in the 80s, it was in difficulty then. And I certainly don't want to use this talk as a place of doom and gloom and saying, oh, well, we're in trouble. But we have to certainly take responsibility and look at, before we can get excited about the future, is what is this spiritualism that we are taking into our future? What is it that we want? And what is it that we no longer need? Now, if you're like me, I'm a bit of a collector, so I like collecting stuff. And yet sometimes, we can end up collecting things and keeping them for no good reason. And I always remember this one church that I went to in Cheshire many, many years ago, and beautiful, beautiful church. And over the platform, there was this very incongruous chandelier. It was very nice, but it was very out of place. It was this whacking great chandelier over the platform. And I said, that's really interesting that to have that there. It's it sort of doesn't seem to quite go, but it's very nice, very beautiful. And they said, yes, it's in memory of one of our members. I said, oh, well, fair enough then. Obviously, they gifted it. I said, who were they? And they said, we don't know. It was a long time ago, and we don't know who they are. That was never written down. We just know that it was given to us, and it's there. And I thought this was a very good analogy for spiritualism in many respects, because we have often taken things from the past, and we feel that we've got to take them into the future, when in fact the future left us a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the point I'm making here is, if you will, is that I could give you, and Laura and I were just speaking beforehand about this, is that I could sit here for the next 20 minutes or so and give you a history lesson on spiritualism, about the great pioneers and what they did and everything. And I mentioned a few of them, certainly from the point of view of the United States. And we could talk about Emma Hardage Britten and so on and so forth. And we're coming up to Hydesville Day on March the 31st. And I could give you a chapter and verse from the history of spiritualism. But the problem is the biggest issue that we've got in spiritualism is we describe the pioneers, but we often honor the individual more so than their works. And the works that they did are really the most important thing that we need if we're going to take spiritualism forward and make it relevant. And I cannot imagine what those people had to go through in order to survive. I mean, you know, as we've discussed before, not that I'm aware of anyway, but and I certainly hope it doesn't ever happen, but I've never been on a public platform where someone has attempted to kill me after the service, you know, or thrown anything at me during the service. They may have thought about it, but they didn't actually put it into action. But these individuals did, you know, they a lot of them feared for their lives because of what was taking place. And so what we have to look at here is the pioneers that we had in the 19th century and 20th century. How can we take the essence of what they created into this 21st century? Well, the interesting thing is if we are to take it forward, and if we are to put a plain fact on it, if we're to even survive, we need to make ourselves relevant once more to society. Yeah. And how do we do that? Well, one of the things that we need to get back to, and again, in my opinion, is return spiritualism back to where it came from, and that was the divine. Return it back to a system wherein which people come into our centers that they may find themselves, and that in finding themselves, they build a relationship with the divine. Yeah. We have got to move away from constantly trying to recruit people to sit in circles and turn them all into mediums. Spiritualism, that was never its intent. Yes, of course, it uses mediums. It doesn't own mediumship. Spiritualism belongs to a variety of different religions. It just happens to use mediumship. But so many people conflate spiritualism and mediumship as the same thing, when actually they're not. Spiritualism uses mediumship, but it's a vehicle for divine revelation. It is not to be worshipped as the be-all and end-all. And a lot of people that we meet today, particularly younger people, are not desperate to be mediums. A lot of young people that I meet today may come into our centers and or certainly, you know, be online, and they'll see a demonstration of mediumship and they will go, okay, yeah, I get that. I believe that anyway. What else do you do?
Yeah.
What else have you got?
Yeah.
You know, it's because what I'm going through as a young person is how can I make a difference in this world? How can I contribute to society? How can I contribute to actually allowing the planet to survive? How can I be part of a place where I actually feel as if I contribute? And if we are going to continue, we have got to start asking those people that come into our centers, not what can we do for you, but what can you contribute to this community of people that we call spiritualists?
Yeah.
Because spiritualism in its present form is a religion or a system that constantly gives out. If you come to us, we'll give you a message. We'll make you feel better. We'll give you a healing. We'll give you some philosophy. We will give you. But in all systems that survive, in all religious systems that survive, there is a two-way process of the individual who is receiving something in the sense of the divine experience, that they also contribute back. And I'm not talking here necessarily financially, though of course that is necessary as well. But I'm not talking about that from a point of view of necessity, but I'm talking about the actual feeling of contribution that someone can make to their community. Because by doing so, it then enables them to feel that they are part of a journey of self-discovery and self-transformation. And by doing so, it creates communities that actually blend and bind together. We will never, ever create communities based around demonstrations of mediumship. What we will do is create communities whereby they come to see a medium, depending on who's on. And, as far as I'm aware, in most other traditions, they generally go to church no matter who's speaking. They go to the temple no matter who is praying or who is leading them. They go to the synagogue over who is there at that moment guiding that community. I don't know, though could be wrong in this, that the main question is, well, who's on tonight? And is there anybody better on down the road? Because what that does is create a system whereby I go to a center of spiritualism to get something and to see someone rather than to belong and contribute. Because once we've had that contact with the spirit, once we've had a message, and we know that there is life after death, and you choose to believe there is life after death, then what? And spiritualism in its essence always was about, the whole point of knowing that there is life after death is to remind people that, okay, now you have a life, what are you going to do with it? And what these pioneers actually did was that they changed the world. They changed the world in communities. They changed the world by bringing about equality. They stood up for workers' rights. They stood up for children's rights. They made the world a better place. But that was through community receiving inspiration from the divine, and that each individual member was moved by the Spirit. And the more that we can actually do that and bring back that understanding of community and that overarching theme of oneness within our churches and communities, then we have a chance of surviving. Because if we don't, we are going to be left with places dotted around the world. And I'm not just talking here about the UK, I'm talking about the United States, I'm talking about Canada, I'm talking about Australia, I'm talking about New Zealand. Wherever we go around the world, spiritualism itself is shrinking. People go, oh, well, it's doing really well, isn't it? Mediumship is, definitely, yeah. I mean, mediumship's fine, thank you very much. Because, as I'm sure you know, you can see a demonstration of mediumship every night of the week, and certainly on here. But spiritualism itself, the actual process by which human beings can decide for themselves the manner through which they receive that communication, that is in not such a good place. And it was interesting, and again, coming from a place of history, that both the probably two great seers coming from different places within spiritualism, Andrew Jackson Davis and Emma Hardinge Britton, both of them said that the public demonstration of mediumship would ultimately destroy spiritualism. Yep. And, so it has been led, and so it has happened, so it has formed. But we are not gone yet. There is a place by which that we can begin, and here obviously we're discussing and here at Poole and with Laurie and all of the changes that are being brought about, and the different speakers and the different topics and the place of discussion, that is grounds for hope, and there are places dotted around the world that are also looking at the ways in which we can bring spiritualism into community. And a spiritualist center should be open 7 days a week, ideally. Now, of course, obviously we're in COVID, and that's not going to happen as soon as the restrictions are lifted. But certainly we need to be able to be embedded within our communities. And I know we've had conversations before where we're able to feel that we are contributing to society. Certainly where myself and Brian Robertson, when we run the Inner Quest Centre, and the Open Door is the spiritualist service that we take there. I mean, we constantly raise funds and also take food to the local shelter. It's a Catholic shelter, actually, for people that are in transition from being on the street to being off the street. And so we constantly are seen within community and active within community. And, these people may never, ever actually enter the center, but they will know that there are people involved in something that probably they may not even ever understand, but they know that these people are activists. And spiritualism was always an active and activist tradition right from the get-go. When in its inception in the burned over district of New York State, this was a really a boiling pot of social transformation. There's no coincidence that where spiritualism began in its, or certainly is taken as to coming from that place in the sense historically, just down the road from Hydesville is Seneca Falls. And Seneca Falls was where the women's suffrage movement began in the United States. And so spiritualism has always constantly been tied by this activist, this movement, this get in there and get your hands dirty experience, and it embraced people's humanity. And yet it's sadly, really, over this last probably 50 years, it's degenerated in many places into this feel-good experience where everything in the spirit world will be better, and that when you die, it's going to be great. But before you die, well, if you are going through stuff, it's just a bunch of lessons. So, suck it up. And that was never spiritualism at all. And that's not certainly what I believe. Spiritualism should be in its form, should be there for everybody in their dark times and in their light times. Spiritualism should be constantly asking us as individuals in our centers now then, not what do you want to be, but it should be asking the question, who are you? And are you that person yet? And if not, how can we help you be the person that you need to be? Because ultimately, the journey of the spiritualist is about the discovery of who they are, the discovery of their own soul, the discovery of being. And yet, and I think I may have shared this with you before. The number of times when I was younger, when I first began, people who my friends who used to come with me, who weren't spiritualists, but used to come with me to support me when I did a church service or a demonstration. Invariably, in many of the churches that they would come with me, I'd introduce, this is Simon James, and this is my friend, and this is my friends, and invariably they would be asked, "And what do you do?" And I always thought that was the most ridiculous question to be asked, because it's, well, what they're doing is breathing generally, and what they're doing is being friends. And spiritualism, in many respects, has found itself in a strange place historically, because it's one of the few religions that I'm aware of and belief systems where everybody has to be somebody. Where everybody wants to be the priest, or is taught that they have to be the priest. Again, if you're a Catholic, I doubt very much whether everybody sat there in the church looking at the priest going, "I think I can do that." A weekend workshop and I'll get the hang of transubstantiation. So why is it that in spiritualism, or in the churches, in the centers, in many places, not all obviously, but in many places, there is this overarching belief that we have to turn our communities all into mediums who are going to be on a platform? We need to get back to the inception of spiritualism, where, yes, mediumship played that part, but it was always for the few. There were always going to be just a few mediums where the spirit would move them in that way to talk to the dead. And this is the point here, that mediumship, and again, I'm not saying anything that wasn't known to our inspirers and pioneers, is that mediumship was about the encouragement of each one of us to be human, to be creative, to find a voice. And our mediumship would find expression in our painting, in our art, in our speech, in our philanthropy, in our ability to serve one another. Our mediumship would find expression in being a good father, a good mother, a good brother, a good sister, a good human. And mediumship is about ultimately being the soul of that individual as much as they possibly can be. Talking to the dead is just like 1/10 of what mediumship is. That's just a side issue. And yet, if we can get back to that original understanding of what spiritualism can be, we have the makings once again of a vibrant tradition that not only can embrace the 21st century, but can offer so much, that it can help to remind people that, yes, no matter how difficult life is, the spirit is there, and that actually nobody is coming to save them, because nobody needs to. They don't need the spirit world. They don't need the guides and helpers. They don't need anybody to come and rescue them on a white charger, because actually all of the strength needed to get through tragedy is built into themselves. And so spiritualism was always about that embracing of the power of the individual in order to transform, to overcome, and to be present in life. And this is why I always say, and we say back home at the Inner Quest, that spiritualism is always about life, not about death. And if we can once more turn the focus back onto that, then we have the possibility of, when that person walks through the door, no matter what age they are, instead of asking them, "What do you do?" or "Would you like to be a medium?" is ask them, first of all, is, who are they? And if you don't know, if you can't answer that, then we have a tradition that can help you answer that question for yourself. And that as you take part within our communities, that you don't just sit there waiting for the spirit world to make you feel better, that actually we can give you the tools to help you make yourself feel better. And then we can ask you, what do you want to contribute to this community? What do you have to offer our community of spiritualists? Do you want to help us return this planet to its beauty again? Do you want to help within an ecological sense, like one of our pioneers, R.J. Lee's constantly campaigned for? Do you want to strengthen fairness and liberty for all? W.T. Steed. Do you want to be able to stand and share your passion for the spirit? Whatever abilities that you have, we can, in spiritualism, provide all of that. And that's why I'm excited for the future. By all means, we can look back to the past, but let us look back to what and how it began and where we have left that. And that, to paraphrase, if you will, and I'm just going to come to a close shortly, so that for those of you who might wish to contribute or if there are any questions here, is really we have to begin to stop asking, what can spiritualism do for you? But rather, what can you do for spiritualism? Because it's already done enough. And we need now, in the 21st century, to be able to recognize that we have this most amazing product, but the packaging really needs to be taken off and presented once more in its original pure sense. And so whether this is on the means of electronic means of the computer, whether this is back in our centers, whether it's a mixture of the two, we have the most amazing ability and tradition to move people. And by moving them, they move themselves. And if they can move themselves, they have the opportunity to move the world, as we did once before. This once again can be our century, but only if we begin to look back, stand upon the shoulders of giants, those pioneers, but not so that we're looking down, but rather that we're looking into the far off. So that when we see someone and we ask them the question, who are you? They can say, I don't know. That's why I've come here. And we can do that, you and I. Thank you.
Simon, I am resisting the urge to go running around the church right now, going whoop whoop and clapping. Absolutely beautiful and so true. Struck so many chords. I know with myself, and I know with the many people watching tonight. Amazing. Yes, we are a religion, you know, and I agree, going back to the very early part of your statement there about the word God is sort of like being pushed to one side and spirit brought in, and that's fine, you know, but still linking in that spirit with that divine energy, and indeed within us, you know, and it is something that we are in danger of overlooking.
Mm-hmm.
Overlooking that fact. And again, very much, I know pre-COVID, if I were to put on an evening of discussion of philosophy, I could probably muster up half a dozen.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to put one of the name mediums in of the area, you'd probably get 145 in. And that, I was noticing that energy. I was getting to that point of, this is not it. Please,
Yeah.
This is not it. This is an invitation. This is the evidential part. That's why it's called evidential mediumship.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the evidence of a greater truth and a greater understanding. And that,
Well,
sorry, carry on.
No, no, absolutely, Laurie, because it's, you know, evidential mediumship plays its part. Of course it does. But it's not the be all and end all. If that's all we are,
yeah,
if that's all we are, then we're just a death cult, you know. And we're just constantly talking to the dead. We've got to get back to talking to the living. That's the point.
Brilliant. Yeah. Question here from Jamie. And he's just asking, if understanding self and our relationship to God is at the center of the spiritualist religion, how can we reflect that in the services that we hold?
Well, personally, I would literally do a radical overhaul of the service, because they are really, I hate this phrase, really, fit for purpose. They don't serve the system anymore. And the thing is, and this is one of the things that I think is wonderful, is that, you know, there is a variety of different services that you can do, and also try them in your own centers, so that actually they become fit for your community. I mean, I can just use an example. Again, Brian Robson, myself, back at the Open Door, Brian Robson created a service whereby the service split into three. So we have a demonstration of healing mediumship, a demonstration of speaking mediumship, and a demonstration of evidential mediumship. And so that actually there is equal amount of emphasis placed on all three. So it's not just, oh, well, let's get the adverts out of the way so we can get to the main event, meaning the demonstration, you know. But we also do services where we actually invite audience participation during the speaking. We may do a question and answers, or we actually have evenings and take them out of the whole service system to actively look at an actual talking point, or a place in which where we can actually directly speak in a much deeper place with people. So actually, you know, I'm just going to use it. This is an example. Is, you know, how can your spiritual life help you cope with financial difficulties? You know, what's the strength in that? Because, you know, it's great to come into a center needing help, but if you've just gone through bankruptcy, how can we support you in that? Okay, we're not financial advisors, but how can we help you find your strength to get you through that? So we really, I think, in our services and the way we put things together, is actually find different ways to constantly speak to the individual and actively look at their relationship to their own, not just their development, but to their relationship with the divine, to see how they can begin to find their own strength. And to be honest with you, I would do a complete overhaul of the traditional service. I would move around, tinker with it. I mean, as I say, Brian and I did this donkeys years ago with Spirit of Youth. You know, we did lots of different services, just to try see what works. But I think it's time to bring back the personal back to the service. And again, I'm going to use something heretical here. And I would also do services without demonstrations of mediumship.
Yeah.
I would actually just take them out and keep the demonstration for a particular point, particular evening, or whatever, particular day, you know, or even if you want to try it by once a month, have a service without any demonstration, but actually do something different whereby there is community, there is actually discussion time, there's actually a greater sense of one-on-one between the speaker and the person who's listening, because at the moment there's a complete disconnect often between the speaker in spiritualism and the person who's being spoken to. You know, there's a real power differential here that I think doesn't work anymore in the 21st century.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not a question, statement-ish, but yeah, there's a good point there to be just explained, I think. Can you read it there, all right?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it depends upon your definition of a medium. If your definition is in the narrow sense of can everybody talk to the dead? Absolutely not. You're either born with that or you're not. And this is where everybody gets really worked up and starts picking up guns and weapons and stuff. But it's just, that's the way it is. I mean, I would have liked to have been born with a really good singing voice. But unfortunately, I sound like Neil Diamond with laryngitis, so that doesn't work. But that doesn't mean to say that I cannot enjoy the process of singing. And this is the problem, you see, is that first of all, we've got to ask ourselves, why does everybody want to be a medium? Why does everyone want to be a medium? Is because in the 21st century, and certainly in the late 20th, is that it comes with the attachment of celebrity, it comes with the attachment of monetary gain, and it comes with the attachment of fame. And in the fame, the Instagram, the Facebook, social media, we have to be seen to be somebody. Now, in the original traditional meaning of the word medium, everybody was a medium in the sense that we are all capable of sensing the divine and being moved by the divine. That's mediumship. Now, some people just have a twist in the soul, and well, to put it on a biological sense, the only thing that differentiates a medium from anybody else is their ability to dissociate their mind. That's the only thing. And there's nothing particularly stunning about that. It just is a quirk, if you will, of the soul. It's a quirk of their psychology. And so one of the things is that we have to explain, first of all, to people that mediumship is ultimately about each one of us listening to that soul, so that actually we can develop our everyday mediumship to help the person that we're speaking to in the street, that we're in our families. And I'm not talking here about talking to the dead, because we've got to keep talking to the dead in the sense of that's an obsession with us. Yes, we understand that the dead can speak to us through aspects of mediumship, but that is to encourage us to live, not to keep speaking to them.
Yeah.
That's the point, because if we keep talking to them all the time, we might as well be with them. And the whole point was to actively help with an individual's grief so they could continue to live. And so that in the actual sense of, in the narrow sense of the meaning of, can everybody talk to the dead? Can their mind dissociate sufficiently to talk to the dead? No, that's not everybody's can do that. That's something that you're either born with or you're not. Can everybody develop their mediumship to talk to themselves and thereby listen to the divine in themselves? Yes, absolutely. And that's what we should be trying to put across to people.
Yeah, I so applaud that. That is one of my strongest philosophies here at Paul. When I say we are all mediums of inspiration, mediums
Absolutely.
of music.
Absolutely.
As you say in your book, to be a great baker, a homemaker, it matters not, because a medium is somebody who talks to spirit, but we always associate spirit with being a discarnate spirit.
That's right.
And it's not. We live in a country with 66 billion spirits, and yet we want to talk to the 66 and 1 billionth spirit who is no longer here.
That's right.
Amazing. Susan, do you feel the spiritist movement has moved too far from the original ethos?
Well, I mean, it depends on, well, first of all, that you're going to have an argument over what the truth of spiritualism is, first of all. So good luck with that. One of the things is this is fixable. I think that's one of the great things. This is fixable, but the question we will run up against always is how many people want to fix it. And then there will be all those people who go, well, actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with thank you very much. I mean, what I've been talking about tonight, other people will go, I've never heard such rubbish in all my life. I don't agree with that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine as it is. Thank you very much. And that's absolutely within their right for people to say that. Absolutely. But if we are going to survive as a meaningful philosophy for change in this world, then we have to come back and examine what it is. What's the point of us? What's the point? As I've said, in lots of times, and as we always say, Brian Robertson and myself, most people that we speak to today are not afraid to die, but they are afraid to live.
Yeah.
They're not, when spiritualism, as was it is, greatest certainly in society, it was in these great social movements, and also certainly during the wars when people were grief-stricken. But society has moved to a place, and a lot of young people, that I meet, accept that mediumship is real and that there's a life after death and that we can talk to them from time to time. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. Do I want to do it all the time? No, I don't, because I actually want to change the world. I want to be of use. That's great. Yeah, that's great. That's fine. But I don't want to go around doing demonstrations all the time. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't people that do. Of course they do. And there will always be that. And there'll always be a need for that. Absolutely. But if we can get back to this now, whether that means spiritualism splits, moves, and goes in different directions, that may be, that certainly is not up to me. I prefer it when we can all work together, because I think there's strength in numbers, not keep fragmenting, because eventually, granite is only as powerful as all of the grains that actually comprise it stick together. As soon as those grains dissociate, all it is just a beach that gets washed away. And we need to be finding ways and finding places of commonality that we can come together and stick together, rather than keep breaking apart, because that's, we've done so much of that in the past. And, that way lies on one level oblivion, sadly.
Yeah, how true. Somebody here obviously knows me. You can see my mind whirring with different ideas. Yes, Anne-Marie. Yes, you can. Lovely Sue Townsend.
Absolutely. I mean, Brian Robertson has always used that phrase, "God of your own understanding," because it's always been the bedrock of what spiritualism, the God of your own understanding. And of course, as many of you know, that's where AA got that phrase from, because the founder of AA was involved in spiritualism. Spiritualist, was a medium, Bill W. And that's part of the history books. You can check that out. And this is the thing, you see, is because the Spirit moved him to create the Alcoholics Anonymous to create a system by where people could be helped. And that's mediumship, you see. That's mediumship. But to sort of come to Sue's question here, the problem is we get so hung up on words. I like using the word God, mainly because it just irritates a heck of a lot of people. To be quite honest with you, because people go, oh no, you can't use the word God, because we've got to use the word Spirit. Well, it's just a word, and if a word irritates you, then you really need to go away and heal your issue with that word. Because if there's baggage with it, then you're carrying a lot of stuff that you need to heal, and that's what spiritualism is all about. But yes, it's about that spirituality, and it's a way of life. And ultimately a community, and literally it is a God of your own understanding, because my God's going to be different to your God, to anybody else's God. And the more that we have that relationship, which spiritualism always said, that we have that relationship, then we have the opportunity to attract far more people, because we actually then can say, well, because ultimately at the moment we go, I've got your mother here, she loves you, now go away and do something with it, which is fine up to a point. We can, the whole point of mediumship is to remind people that death is not the end, and that gives us hope and it moves us forward. Absolutely. But the point of that is now you know your mother is with you, or your father, your husband, your brother, your partner, whoever it is. Now you know that. So now this is where we do the hard graft to go, okay, so now what are you going to do with that information? Because that's pretty life-changing. If you know that you've just spoken to a dead person, that's pretty amazing. What are you going to do with it? Because that should be an earth-shattering, mind-numbingly point of transformation in a person's life that goes, okay, if I live after death, then this life has meaning. So what then? How can I make my life have meaning? And how can I ascribe meaning to this life through my spirituality, through my own divinity? And how can I have a relationship with that God, that the one with 1,000 names and yet is nameless? How can I have that relationship? You know, so absolutely.
Yeah, brilliantly explained. Question often asked here within Paul Church with people coming in, because we always make a point in anybody new coming in, especially greet, hello, how do you know, the introduction is so important. And quite common, people say, well, I don't think I believe in the same God as you. And I said, no, it doesn't matter. I don't care if you think the universe is run by a giant tree frog.
Absolutely.
The important thing is that you believe in something.
That's right. You know, and ultimately, you know, I always like to say, well, you know, it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not, but it does matter whether God believes in you. You know, and that's the point, you know, and we have a phrase back home that we always say, it doesn't matter what you call God, as long as you call God. Because
like that.
that's the point. Yeah, and that's what Brian Robertson and myself, we always say back home at the Inner Quest, you know, because it's about that relationship. But it doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter what name you give it, but it's that relationship that's constantly telling you that you are just as important in a spiritualist center as the person up on the platform doing the messages. And yet the problem is that has got lost because mediums are portrayed and have been brought up to think that they are closer to God, which is absolute rubbish. No one is any higher or lower than anyone else. We are all equal. And that's been, the drive of spiritualism. And its inception, it's the equality of all humanity. And mediums ain't anything special. They just happen to do a certain thing, like plumbers, like doctors, like nurses, you know? And let's put it this way. Think of, we're just coming to, well, hopefully we're coming to the end of this pandemic, or we can see it in sight. You know, look at the amazing spiritual influence that's come and shown itself in this world. And I'm not talking about guides and helpers and unicorns and rainbows and all of that stuff. I'm talking about doctors, nurses, workers on the front line, people doing ordinary things to make everybody's life extraordinary, you know? And that's what we should be saying constantly within our centers, that these, it's, you know, the spirit moves human beings to be divine. And we have seen that, you know, in so many ways during this pandemic. And that's what we should be constantly be trumpeting from the highest rooftops.
Definitely. Lynn Hopkins, actually, I really like this.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I love that.
Over the last 30 years of working at the Arthur Findlay College, all of the weeks that Brian Robertson and myself ran there, we had every day on our weeks, there was a class on self-development. There was a class on self-development in every class. And, you know, before, and again, you know, the thing is that this is, again, nothing new in the original tradition of spiritualism. You would go into an awareness class first before you even allowed anywhere near a circle. And the awareness was to make you aware of self. You know,
yeah.
This is not anything amazingly new. This was you go into a place of awareness. And the problem is because we've created a generation of teachers, sadly, whereby I've got to create mediums. I've got to create mediums. You know, if I've not got a circle and I'm not producing a bunch of mediums, then I'm failing. Well, actually, no. We should be producing human beings that just happen to some of them at least may be able to talk to our ancestors. That's all it is. You know, when I first worked at the Arthur Finney College, my teacher Gordon Higginson brought me there because I just finished a degree in psychology, and he asked me to work at the Arthur Finney College to actively bring psychological study and psychological welfare into the Arthur Finney College, because so many mediums and so many people who came to the Arthur Finney College were in a difficult place, you know. And if you've ever been to the Arthur Finney College, or you know, if you've been to any kind of development group, there will become a place where you will go through transformation. You'll go through a spiritual crisis and a human crisis. You know, generally at the Arthur Finney College, it's described on a week as Tearful Tuesday or Weepy Wednesday, or you know, slightly depressed Thursday. I mean, you know, and all that's nothing to do with the spirit. It's when you've been living there with people of like mind for nearly a week. You've found on one level people who understand you. You can speak the same language. You feel safe, and all of the stuff that you've carried over the years just goes, which is normal. But you know, people think they go there to be taught mediumship, but it's never been about that. It's always been about, certainly the first times anyway, that it's always been about you've got to find out who you are, because you'll never be able to talk if you are a demonstrating medium, or that's something you want to do. You'll never be able to talk to the dead because you won't be able to find them. Because if you don't know who you are, they can't find you. You know, and this is my passion. That's why I'm going on 1,000 of them. But it's to me, it's so important that we've got to get back to putting people into classes of awareness first, and before they even get let loose on any kind of phenomena-driven circle.
Yeah, my background in industry is heavily on the training part, and I love that energy when people get it. You know, when they actually understand it and thought, well, part of the plan, I suppose, that's transferred into my spiritual work as well. And it's just, and like you, I don't want everybody to walk in to be a medium, to be a healer. I just want you to be happy.
Yeah. Because it's
really easy philosophy.
Exactly, because there's so many mediums out there that are just neurotic. You know, they're not happy people, because they don't think they're allowed to be unhappy. Because if you're a medium, you've got to be constantly talking to the spirit, and the spirit moves you, and you know, all this rubbish. You know, I remember, you know, Brian Robertson, when he first worked at the Arthur Finney College, he was asked to teach a group of advanced mediums about bereavement, because that was his background, and he worked in bereavement counselling. And he said at the time, he says, "Oh, I was dreading, because I thought, oh, they'll be really cool with this. You know, they'll really be way ahead of the curve." And within 10 minutes, they were all basically crying their eyes out because they're not dealt with their own grief. They were so busy dealing with everybody else's grief, they'd never got to work on their own self. And it's so vital that we put this in and put it back.
Hugely, absolutely hugely. So many comments coming in here. The range of viewers tonight, absolutely amazing. We've got New Zealand, Denmark, Sweden, Canada, America, and the UK. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Simon, any closing thoughts for everybody?
I think ultimately and this is where we get this disconnect, is we constantly look for spiritualism to do something, and it's easy to sit here and go, well, somebody must do something, you know, somebody must save us, somebody must make spiritualism in the way that we want it. Well, guys around the world, that's up to you. You are spiritualism. If you want spiritualism to survive, and again, as I've said, without being too negative here, it's on life support. If you want to save it and it just doesn't become a historical footnote in history of this amazing transformative system that literally transformed the world in the 19th century. You know, as I said quickly, I don't want to take up too much time, Laurie, here. But you know, this computer that I'm speaking through, because of spiritualism's pioneers, one of them, Sir Oliver Lodge, who was involved in electromagnetism and electromagnetic waves, which ultimately was led to the invention of computerization and everything else. Because of these people, we can communicate in this way. You know, none of us, well, some of you may be, you know, world famous physicists, I don't know out there. But if you want spiritualism to be a viable belief system and system where people can find a home, then it's up to all of us to do something about it. We can't wait, because we can't keep waiting for the spirit world to come in on their white chargers and save us. We can't keep saying, well, somebody must do something and harumph, harumph, harumph. It's up to us. We are the future. I'm optimistic. I believe we can do this, guys. Spiritualism in the future may look very different to what we've got now. I certainly hope so, because if it is, and it looks completely different to what we have now, we have done our job. And in 100 years' time, people can look back and go, you know, those guys in the early 21st century, they managed to turn it around. Thank goodness they did that, you know, and that's up to us. And that's be the spiritualist that you need to be in your churches and communities. Allow the spirit to move you so that actually our communities find the world. And once more, the world will be welcome back in our centres.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Sorry, I just need to add this because I've been prompted. And the Netherlands as well. Simon,
yeah.
Truly inspiring, uplifting, and so strengthening. Do you know what? Your talks, your presentations tonight, and the ones that I've viewed of late from you, you have this inspiration energy. You know, you come away from this and thinking, yes, I can do something. And that is such a gift. And we thank you for sharing that tonight.
Been my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Laurie.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Absolutely beautiful. Next Wednesday, we have Stephen Trolland talking to us. It will be an earlier time of 6 till 7. And after which there is a small online Hydesville Day celebration, which is yet to be announced, but watch out for that. So next Wednesday's Lyceum is with Stephen Trolland, and it will be at 6 o'clock UTC. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Simon, I can't say thank you enough. I'm going to keep saying it, but thank you.
Pleasure.
Brilliant evening. Oh, and Switzerland. There we go.
Yep. Wherever you are in the world, you be the change. Okay, guys.
Exactly. Brilliant. Take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. God bless, and good night.
Bye-bye now. Bye.